Welcome, everyone. We'll start shortly. If you want to just introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're calling in from, where do you work? We're so happy to have you here, but welcome, John. Do you want to let us know where you're calling in from? And if all the fellows can introduce themselves in the chat as well, make sure you select to everyone and not hosts and panelists only. And we'll get started shortly. Please let us know where you're calling in from. All right, let's begin. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm seeing people joining from Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, Mogadishu, the US, Brazil. We're such a global community. The UK, Australia, literally from every part of the world. A warm welcome to everyone. Please continue to introduce yourself in the chat, where you're calling in from, your organization. Feel free to share emails if you want people to connect with you, LinkedIn profiles, etc. This is a great opportunity to network with the global community. All right, with that, we are excited to start this webinar. My name is Shakufe Zanji. I'm the Global Technical Lead with the Early Childhood Development Action Network. I'm joined by my colleagues at the ECDAN Secretariat, Emily Gilkinson and Harper Lagares, who are part of the group that's helping organize the Knowledge Fellows Program. And today we have the pleasure of hearing from all our fellows from the 2024 cohort. But before we hear from them, a quick overview of the Fellows Program. All right, let me do this. So the program began in 2021, and the goal was to create opportunities for early career, early childhood professionals, not young, but early career, who are interested in the global early childhood field. So till today, we've had 4 cohorts with 26 Knowledge Fellows from over 18 countries. The Knowledge Fellows is sorry, I just got distracted by the hand. There's a steering committee for the Knowledge Fellows that provides oversight to the design and implementation and quality control. It is chaired by Dr. Francis Aboud at this time. So with a big thanks to the members of the steering committee. So usually we have about 4 to 8 Knowledge Fellows per year. This year we had the biggest cohort. We had 8 Knowledge Fellows, and usually they're paired with a mentor who is an early childhood professional who meets with them on a monthly basis, sometimes more, to provide direction to their project. Usually the fellowship takes between 6 to 9 months, and they work really hard, at least on average 10 hours a week. This year, we also had a unique feature, peer mentors, which are past Knowledge Fellows that supported the fellows throughout their projects. And you can find projects of the current cohort and past cohorts on our website, and we'll share that link in the chat. A little bit of an overview of where the past fellows have come from all over the world, and where past mentors have come from. And with that, I'm going to kick off our series, because we have a really exciting cohort this year where there was a focus a big focus, not everyone focused on it, but a big focus on climate. So it's going to be a really exciting day because we have 8 people and we have only, yes, please use your reactions. Great. I love that people are using their reactions. This is excellent. So anytime you're interested, use your reactions. If you have questions for the fellows, pop them in the Q&A chat. Remember, because we're hearing from, it's like a mini TED Talk series. We're going to hear a quick 7-minute presentation from each fellow. We encourage you to read their full reports on their website and share them widely. Please remember that these projects are not ECDAN projects, but they are independent projects developed by the fellows, and they should be seen as that way. They should not be seen as ECDAN products. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A, and if you have chat, you want to share resources or share about your own experiences, please use the chat function for that. So without further ado, let me introduce our first fellow, Hernan Marisquirena, who is from Uruguay. And he has been working on a report detailing elements of climate services. We get to learn about what climate services are, what are examples of organizations in the field, and how do we integrate early childhood within climate services. His mentor was Gary Belkit, who's the director and founder of the Billion Minds Institute, who was also the former mental health commissioner for the city of New York. And his peer mentor from the last cohort is Mubarak Abdul Rahman. So with that, Hernan, I'm going to stop sharing and over to you.
Thanks so much, Shekufe. Let me share my screen now. Thank you for the introduction. Please let me know if you can see my screen properly.
Yes, you're good, Hernan.
Thank you. And I will start with the Duke. Thank you as well to the ECDAN team, Shekufe, Emily, and Hannah, also to Gary, who was my mentor, as Shekufe detailed, as well as Mubarak, who was my peer mentor. And I will start with a brief story of these 2 people that are called Mariela and Luis. They are farmers from Uruguay, and as everywhere, they are experiencing increasing challenges because of climate change. Last year, they received an alert, issued by the National Climate Services Agency from Uruguay. And the issue was about an upcoming drought in their area. And they used this information to make decisions. They bought drought-resistant seeds. They planted them, and they also stored extra water. And this timely action allowed them to protect their livelihood and also protect and feed their family. And they are just not worried about the crops. They are also worried about their children. The youngest is struggling to sleep, and the oldest is struggling to focus at school, all because of the heat waves that came with the drought. So my question now is, what if this climate information couldn't just help us with the crops, but actually also to protect our children? And that's precisely the work of climate services. As you can see, the definition is pretty simple. Climate services provide climate information to make decisions. And this works, as you can see in the image, in a spectrum of forms, going from basic climate data, such as historical rainfalls registers that are generally issued by climate services or meteorological agencies at the national level. And as we move up toward a more active engagement, the services are tailored and targeted to specific users. In this case, the providers are climate scientists working generally with other professionals to integrate this climate knowledge into specific actions. The main added value of climate services is that it allows to anticipate climate events and therefore to prepare in advance for them, just as the example I gave at the beginning with the family and the drought. Again, in the most active side of the spectrum, what you can see in blue in the image, climate services are tailored and targeted to specific users. And following this approach, in the last years, climate services have increasingly brought together not just specialists from the climate science, but also professionals from the economics, health and development sectors, helping to turn this scientific data into practical solutions. And this allowed to identify specific climate-related risks for populations, specific populations, and specific sectors as well, making the responses more coordinated, more relevant, and also more effective. And my work was focused, as Shikufe mentioned, in identifying ways to integrate ECD into climate services. And this is an important and a very timely question. Firstly, because young children are one of the most vulnerable population to climate change. But in spite of that, and we will hear of this also from other fellows, ECD is constantly neglected in the climate policies and climate strategies. And the point I want to emphasize in this presentation is that for these climate policies and strategies to be truly effective, equitable, and sustainable, they have to incorporate children needs and children considerations in the discussions. And to this end, climate services seem to be a very good venue for two main reasons. The first one is the developed network of transdisciplinary collaboration that I mentioned before. But secondly, within the climate arena, it's a discipline that increasingly recognizes the importance of having ECD in the table in these discussions. I want now to focus on my recommendations. These are entry points, which mean opportunities for positioning ECD within the climate services efforts. And I want to begin with something related to the governance. To influence policy, it's essential to identify decision-making entities at the right level. The global framework of climate services is the key institution coordinating everything related to climate services. It operates within the World Meteorological Organization, and its scope includes at least three main areas that might be of interest for ECD. That's policy, capacity development, and also data generation. Linked to this last point on data generation, both climate services and ECD rely heavily on the information that it's generated. And while there's plenty of information from both sectors, the point I want to emphasize is that a better integration is needed between the two of them. If we can link information about, for example, malnutrition with drought forecasts, we could improve climate risks assessments focused on children, and that can help us better understand, but also prevent the impacts of climate extremes on children. Another example could be with heat registers and also children's health, as the example I gave at the beginning of the presentation. And something important to mention in this point is that in order to make this really effective, this data must be broken down by age group, just to identify specific risks and specific needs for each stage of childhood. A third point, it's on ECD design, and there's also work to do from the inside. ECD projects should push for a wider uptake of climate elements. An example of this could be working with ministries of education to develop curriculums to include climate preparedness from early years. And this is important from a sustainability standpoint, because early interventions could save future costs, but also start building adaptive capacity from an early age. A fourth point, it's on adjusting the services to the users. In the case of ECD, these users are mainly parents, caregivers, and teachers, and therefore the information should be practical and accessible for them. There's a strong point, point here on how the climate is built and also how it's communicated. And finally, in terms of resources, there's a great opportunity and there's great appetite from organizations working around climate services, including the World Meteorological Organization and also NGOs working in the intersection between climate and childhood to develop joint funding proposals. Again, ECD strengthens the point of sustainability on the future costs that could be saved, but also in building adaptive capacity from the very beginning of the generations that will be actually leading with the new consequences and stages of climate change. I'll stop here. I invite you all to read the report in the website. I will be sharing the link shortly. Thank you all, and happy to take any questions in the chat.
Wonderful. How exciting, Arnan. Thank you so much. So this is so exciting because it opens up a whole new area of engagement for us with climate services. So if you have any questions for Arnan, I encourage you to put them in the Q&A. So take a minute now, open up the Q&A, and if you have questions for him, put it there, but his report is much longer and you can find that on the website. So as you're doing that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our next Knowledge Fellow, Ruoyu Li, who is based in China. And she has been doing an analysis of climate action plans of the 10 most populated countries projected to be the most populated countries over the next 100 years for their consideration of young children. So we're going to see what we can learn about their national climate plans. She was mentored by Joe Waters, the founder and director of CAPITA, which is a think tank based in the United States. And her peer mentor was Duong Vu from Vietnam, who was a peer from the last cohort. So with that, over to you, Ruoyu. And again, everyone, I encourage you to put in questions in the Q&A as you hear the presentations and read their projects. All right, over to you, Ruoyu.
Great. Thank you so much, Shagufei. I'll share my screen now. Okay. Thank you so much, and good morning, afternoon, and evening. My name is Ruoyu, and my project is an analysis of national climate policies and how they address the needs of children, especially the youngest ones. But before I jump into the details of my research, let me share a story of my cousin. He is a 3-year-old living in the northern part of China. Last summer, his village was hit by a series of climate disasters. First came devastating floods that submerged their farming lands and almost their house. Then just weeks later, an extreme heat wave struck the region. His family lost their crops, their home, and nearly their lives. And now let's look at China's nationally determined contributions document. This is actually a 62-page document with strong commitments such as emission reduction targets, renewable energy initiatives. But how many times does it mention protecting children like my cousin from climate risks and disasters? The answer is zero, none, not once. In fact, China isn't alone. My research suggested that there is a global gap in policymaking, especially in the youngest, for the youngest ones in children. The children are missing out from the national climate policies that are designed to protect and to serve them. So my research focused on 10 most populous countries, like Shagufei mentioned, that will represent over half of the population by in the globe by the year of 2100. They include 5 countries in Asia, 4 countries in Africa, and United States. These countries face varying and different climate risks, from extreme heat waves in the US to flooding in Bangladesh and mudslides in rural China. Using content analysis with a compiled list of keywords, I examined 3 key climate policy frameworks in these 10 countries. They are, first is the Nationally Determined Contribution Document, what we call NDC. They are the countries guiding climate action plans under the Paris Agreement. And the second, I looked into the National Adaptation Plans, what we call NAP. They are strategies for adaptation to climate impacts. And also the disaster risk reduction, the DRR strategies. They are the national plans to manage climate-related disasters. Despite growing recognition of children's climate vulnerability, my analysis revealed significant gaps in how these climate policies are actually addressing the unique needs of children, especially for the youngest ones. Now let's look at the findings. First of all, are children actually included in the climate policies at all? My research shows that overall, there is limited and superficial inclusion of children in these national climate policies. Only 6 out of the 10 countries even mention children in their action plans. And when they do, it's often broad and vague. For example, in Nigeria's NDC, they mention youth action manual. That's one term that is highly relevant to children that I can find across the documents, which you can see it doesn't really refer to children specifically, and let alone early childhood. This isn't just an oversight, it's actually a systematic or policymaking failure to protect the most vulnerable in the face of policy planning. And next, specifically, there is a systematic neglect of the ECD component in these climate policies. Just 2 countries, Pakistan and DR Congo, they referenced early childhood development specifically, But even these two actually focus narrowly on mortality rates only, ignoring nutrition, education, and healthcare and other important aspects of early childhood development during climate shocks. And that next, even when children are included in the policy documents, but how, in what ways? I found there is a predominance of passive vulnerability framing without action in these documents. Policies, they tend to label children as vulnerable, but they rarely backed it up. For example, in DR Congo's NDC documents, they list children as a vulnerable group, but in the whole document, they offer no concrete steps or actions in the same document. Words without action plans leave the kids unprotected. And despite there is recognition of child critical services, there is actually isn't one holistic integration for such child critical services into the climate action plans. Countries, on the one hand, they do acknowledge child critical services like education, healthcare, in these climate policies, but they are very fragmented. For example, in Tanzania's National Disaster Management Strategy, nutrition programs in disaster plans was mentioned, but they weren't actually connected to a broader climate resilience strategies. And lastly, the multi-sector approaches are inconsistent. Most countries, like China, they mention children in some frameworks, for example, in the NAP documents and the DRR documents, but they tend to exclude or miss children in other documents, for example, in the guiding NDC documents. And more details of the analysis and examples of the policy documents can be found in my report on the website, and the link will be shared with you shortly. And based on the findings, here are some recommendations for policymakers in the field of climate change. So first of all, let's try to make children visible in national climate policies. Governments and policymakers must set specific targets for children in climate plans using explicit and actionable languages. And secondly, early childhood development should be prioritized. Policymakers should incorporate the ECD components and considerations into the climate mitigation and adaptation strategies at the national level and connect the climate policies with the existing ECD programs. And lastly, we should integrate child critical services through a joint effort across sectors. Policymakers shall connect and coordinate in a better way, coordinate the social services that are critical to children's development, including education, nutrition, healthcare, etc., into a unified climate strategy. To summarize, climate policies that today are like building a lifeboat without actually considering the room for our youngest passengers. My research shows that we can and we must do better at the policy planning level. Let's turn this oversight into opportunity. Thank you.
Super, really exciting, Royu. So I see some great questions that have come in the Q&A for Hernan. I encourage everyone to do the same for Royu. Really, really interesting. So now we've had a taste of what's happening at the national level, and now with our next fellow, Bashiru, he's going to go through what's happening at the national level, at the city level. So let me introduce you to our next fellow, Bashiru Touré, who's joining us from Sierra Leone. His project was looking at climate action plans of the 12 most populated cities. And so we're going to learn about that. His mentor was also the founder and director of Capita, Joe Waters, and his peer mentor was Tashar Simasiku, who was from our first cohort, in fact. And so, Bashiru, over to you. Quite excited to learn about what's happening at the city level. Thanks, Royu. And please find Royu's project in the chat and have your questions ready for her also in the Q&A. All right, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. Is my screen visible?
Yes, not yet, but it looks like it's loading. Yep, it is now.
Okay. So, thank you everyone. And as you have rightfully heard from the introduction, my project is looking at the city level, how cities are planning for children amid climate change and population crisis. So, a background. Children, whether those in developed or developing countries, are all exposed to at least one climate change related danger. So this fact has made the United Nations to refer to climate change problems as a child rights crisis. But the problems is worse for children in cities. Why? For example, we can all relate when there is a flood. For adults, we can easily run to a safer place. But then what about the infants? The young children, we have to go and cater for them because they are more vulnerable. They cannot protect themselves as adults can do. And some of these problems that we are facing right now, such as the high temperature, the heat, and even the sea level rise, will be difficult to stop or to prevent as we are approaching the end of the century. But we have a hope, and the hope is to plan ahead. So in light of this, my project looked at how 12 cities that are facing current and projected population and climate change related problems are planning for children. So I did a systematic review to understand the problem and to find a solution. And I did also a thematic analysis. So when I was reviewing the plans, I was looking for how children are mentioned. But again, I took a bit step forward to see, well, not just mentioning children, but what this means. Are they actually planned for, or they were just mentioned? I actually took note of the actual plans that are there for children. This screenshot shows an example of what my report considers to be a plan for children. This is an example from Tokyo. So, climate action plans, just an overview, is a document that contains the current situation of cities and what they want to achieve amid climate change related problems. Young children, whether now or end of the century, there will always be children in the world, regardless of any demographic change. So, not including children in plans will mean like as if they have been excluded. And this is what we don't want as ECD professionals or anyone that cares about children. My projects focus on water, sanitation and hygiene, early environmental and climate change education, food security and nutrition. So these are my findings. Currently, about 1,000 children die from causes related to poor water, sanitation, and hygiene. So I used this knowledge and I looked at the report. And I found out that among all the plans that I reviewed, only Mumbai and Rio de Janeiro included wash planning for children. Also, we all know that early childhood is the best period to instill early knowledge in children. And this knowledge will be helpful for them even if they become adults. So, because without knowledge, you can't protect yourself what you don't know about. So I looked at the plans to see how they plan to educate young children to protect themselves from climate change and environmental problems. And I found out that Dhaka, Lagos, Mumbai, Tokyo, and New York are the only cities that have put plans in place related to early environmental education. And currently, report shows that about 161 million children under 5 are exposed to food insecurity concerns. So I use this knowledge also to see how cities are planning for children's food, nutrition, and needs. And I found out that none of the cities included this planning in their report. And also, none of the plans that I studied presented that they obtained the concerns from children or their caregivers when planning for them. So this can mean two things. It can either mean that they obtained the concerns from children and their caregivers, but they did not document it, or it means that they actually plan for children, but they did not detail how they do it. So following the findings that I got, these are some of the recommendations. First, most of the cities that are exposed to population and climate change related problems are yet to develop a plan. My first recommendation is every city should have a plan. And second, for those that have developed a plan but did not include children's concern, they should do so. And they can best do so by collaborating with ECD professionals so that the climate change action plans can be child sensitive. And when planning for children, my recommendation is planners should take notes of the needs of different age groups of children, because different age groups require different planning needs in cities. Well, because of time, I will not go through all the age groups, but I have a picture here that shows good examples of how different age groups should be planned for. We can see from 0 to 3, their needs can best be possible by stroller-friendly parks. And from age 5 to 3, they need play-based education in outdoor. And for children age 6 to 8, they should be exposed to environmental practices such as tree planting. And in general, all climate change action plans should promote safe outdoor and independent play for children. They should promote the environment that exposes to children to no climate change extremes. And cities should make sure that they plan their environment to prevent some of these occurrences that I'm showing you on the slide. And they should transform from this to this. So in such an environment, children will be happier and play in a more joyful way. And this is the end of my report, my presentation, and please make sure to check the full report. Thank you all for your time.
Wow, well done, Bashiru. Thank you so much. So, colleagues, let's recap what we've heard so far. We heard from Ernan about climate services more broadly, as a whole area of possible intervention. Then we heard from Royu about national climate action plans and what we can do. And from Bashiru, now we heard about city level action plans. So he will be sharing with you the link to his project in the chat. Encourage you to ask Q&A. I'm noticing that the fellows are responding to your questions, so head over to Q&A to read responses to other questions. You can also vote for questions. And again, just a reminder that these projects are not ECDAN projects, but rather projects, independent projects of Knowledge Fellows. So not to confuse them as official recommendations from the network, but rather a research project completed by a fellow. All right, with that, we'll head over now to the next fellow. So we've heard about the global situation with climate services. We heard about country level efforts, national level efforts, and city level efforts. Now we'll take a deep dive into a particular country, and we are going to be joined by Omkar Balel. Also, one thing I want to point out to you is the interesting profile of the fellows. Some of our fellows actually come from the climate and the environmental sector, like Bashiru and Omkar actually. So they don't have backgrounds in early childhood. So this is an opportunity for them to also learn about the early childhood sector. So Omkar, he has been, I'm just gonna stop Bashiru's video. Omkar, he has been doing a review of 7 Indian states who are most vulnerable to climate change, and to evaluate whether their particular plans include considerations for young children, and share his recommendations with us. Omkar was mentored by Nilima Chopra from the Asia Pacific Regional Network for Early Childhood, who, by the way, are doing some excellent work on climate change. I encourage you all to go to their website. They have some great resources on climate. And his peer mentor from the last cohort was Tanvi Sethi. All right, Omkar, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sekupe, for wonderful introduction. I will share my screen. Just let me know that is it visible or not. Is my screen visible, Shekupe?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, sure. So I would like to start. Namaste. This is Omkar here from India. And as Shekupe mentioned that I would like to deal with the subnational states of India and how they are intersecting with young children. So before that, I would like to give you some background information. And we all know that India is one of the most affected country by climate change. And actually, it is the seventh most affected country by climate change. And in that, only 38% of children have access of ECD, that is early childhood education. At the same time, extreme poverty and stunting contribute to poor health and nutritional deficit under young children. India also have a huge child population below 6-year-old. That is more than 10% of population is having the of young children in the India. Coming on the climate aspect, we have National Action Plan of Climate Change, that is NAPCC, and State Action Plan of Climate Change that deals at the subnational level to deal with the climate change. And when we come to the assessment of climate change, we have HDI Gross Domestic Climate Risks and CW Child Climate Vulnerability Index, which has done very good works at the climate level and how they are intersecting with the state. So, like I told it, based on these two studies and the child density, I have tried to identify 7 most vulnerable states, and at the same time, I have ensured that they should be available at the online literature. So, based on that, I have tried to identify these 7 highlighted states for the further assessment from the young children intersection. So for that, first I had literature review, and based on that, as I discussed, I have identified these 7 vulnerable states, that is Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Assam, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Punjab. And I would like to make sure here is that all states are diverse in that itself, so that we should cover each of the aspects of the Indian states over here. So further, I have tried to evaluate these states based on the UNICEF studies, which has also evaluated NDCs of 121 countries, which my colleague Ruyo also had discussed on that how each NDC is trying to evaluate the young children perspective on the climate plan. So I will be studying or dealing the state climate plans with the help of these UNICEF studies. So we have 4 categories in the studies which mention inclusivity of children, reference to children, holistic and multi-sectoral approach, at the same time right-based approach, whereas they have some respective indicators of each category. So with the help of these indicators, that is 23 indicators, I have tried to analyze each states that how they are dealing with the young children. So as you can see that Gujarat has done very good works over here, comparatively good work, that 10 indicators out of 23 has been followed, that they are trying to capture the young children aspect. At the same time, Maharashtra is just well below that 6 out of 23 indicators has been followed. Apart from that, resti, that is Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, Bihar and Punjab are there, while Assam has very less performed at that only 1 indicator has been followed out of 23 indicators. So from this, we can take an idea that how poor these states have been performing when we compare from the young children perspective. So so as of now, these plans don't including age-wise separation. They are just dealing with the very general wage. And as we all know that separate age groups have separate needs. No states has a dedicated sections that are dealing with the young children for their needs and challenges. No states has explicitly considered sanitation, mental well-being, and social protection. And we all know that how important are this. At the same time, plans were very geographically similar, and as I told you that they are very diverse. So we expect that there should be some diverse or what we can say state-specific approach to deal with the young children. But that was not the case here. Here are some positive findings. So out of 7 states, Gujarat was only one of the states that has included WCD department, that is Women and Child Department, in the entire process of SCPCC, that is State Action Plan. At the same time, Karnataka is the only state that has emphasized right-based approach by mentioning social justice through its child protection policy. Whereas Bihar is the only state that has mentioned disaster management curriculum in their school, but as I told, that age group has not been mentioned over there. And at the same time, Uttar Pradesh climate plans include ECD with the help of annual workshop and health focused curriculum. So when I was going through all these findings, I realized that I found some challenges in the literature, and insignificant share of finance was one of the challenge. Because of that, young children are not getting incorporated in the policies. Apart from that, siloed functioning of ECD department, at the same time climate change departments, they are not working together. So that was the one of the important challenge over here. Apart from that, state climate plan, they are not involving ECD stakeholders in the various stages, that is development and implementing stage at the policy. We all know that basic social services are getting affected by climate change, but these are often overlooked in these policies. So with the help of all these challenges and finding, I had tried to put some recommendations on the table for policymakers. And we all saw that the lack of finance was the main challenge. So to deal that, states bureaucrats can leverage multilateral climate funds like green climate funds or global environment fund, especially in the first 1,000 days, because we all know that ROI of first 1,000 days is quite high for the ECD intervention. Apart from that, states should involve WCD department and child right protection representative in their planning commission. At the same time, states should involve all the existing schemes related to young children, that is ICDS schemes or integrated child protection scheme. At the same time, early child education, which is there in the national education policy of India. Until and unless states don't equip or do capacity building of paramedical staff, Anganwadi staff, caregiver, this plan is not going to be sustainable. So to train these stakeholders is very important for the state policymaker. At the same time, states should prioritize remote and digital health as well as education service to deal and mitigate the climate change related disruption. And as my colleagues also discussed, that states need to ensure that every infrastructure, young children related infrastructure should be climate proof. At the same time, separate girls toilets should be there, while dedicated breastfeeding spaces should also be there. We have put some recommendation for the state, but at the same time, we ECD stakeholders have also some responsibility to do for young children. So basically here we can act as a bridge between states and the young children to represent their voice and the needs. Apart from that, we ECD can leverage our expertise to train and do capacity building of all the related stakeholders like Anganwadi staff, medical workers, teachers, and caregivers to have them capacity building related to climate change. We need to support that. ECD need to support the states for policy related advocacy in the entire process of planning, that is drafting, implementing, and monitoring at the various stages of intervention. At the same time, states should enhance age and state specific research related to climate change intersections and young children intersection through academic and state level intervention. So that's it from my end. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ECDAN, for providing this opportunity. Namaste.
Thank you, Omkar. Well done. I learned so much about what's happening in India. Nicely done. I love the reactions, everyone. Keep them coming. So with that, we will transition to our last presentation in the climate series. So we've looked at climate services, national plans, city level plans, a deep dive into India. And now we will look at how this whole situation of climate, how it affects a particular group of children on the move. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our next fellow, Rosa Taylor, who is based in the United States. As you see, we have a wide spread of fellows from all around the world. And she will be looking at how young children are impacted by climate change and are required to be on the move and what the recommendations are. She was mentored by Anita Anastasio, who is the lead of early childhood development with BRAC International. And her peer mentor was Noeli Amon-Cote, who was a fellow with our last cohort. So really excited to share, to learn with you, Rosa, as this presentation will close off the climate series. So over to you, and a reminder to ask your questions in the Q&A to the fellows. Fellows be responding to them. And over to you, Rosa.
Great, thank you so much, Jacobe. All right, just going to get my screen ready. Here we go. All right, hi everyone. Hope you're having a really good morning or evening wherever you are. As Jacobe mentioned, I'm excited to share with you a bit on the research that I've been doing at the intersection of ECD and climate mobility. To define that term up front, climate mobility is an umbrella term for the ways in which climate change will shape and often limit the choices that families make on when, where, and how to move. This can include everything from displacement after a sudden onset event like a storm, to migration because of slower onset climate impacts, or planned relocation, which is when a community moves together, often with government support. At times, we can also use the term to indicate immobility, where families are left living in places that are less and less habitable. It is hard to get good data or projections on children's future mobility, but we do expect that children from low-income countries that have contributed the least to climate change are going to be affected the most. As an indication of scale, more than 62 million children were displaced by extreme weather events alone over 2016 to 2023, or more than 24,000 children every day. And the World Bank estimates that as many as 216 million people could migrate because of climate change by 2050. So within that context, I wanted to understand whether and how practitioners and policymakers were starting to respond or plan for the needs of young children experiencing climate mobility and identify gaps in that response. I read more than 100 reports and papers on the impact that climate change, climate mobility, and mobility generally have on young children, and I conducted key informant interviews with experts in both ECD and climate mobility. I want to highlight a few key learnings from that work, though there is a lot more in my report. The first is that the image or stereotype that we might have of climate change driving families across borders is not really what the face of this will be. Families who do move internationally are going to have unique needs, but they're not going to be the majority. Instead, most young children affected by climate mobility will be immobile, internally displaced, or will move locally. Many times, that might look like a move from a rural to an urban area. Climate mobility is expected to be a driver of further urbanization. We learned about some of the challenges that cities are going to face from Bashiru, and indeed without advanced planning, there are concerns that this is going to contribute to strained systems, overcrowded classrooms, housing shortages, which can push young children and their families into informal settlements and increase the chances of secondary displacement. But at the same time, being in an urban area can open up access to resources and quality services that children didn't have before, which really gets at this next point. Young children experiencing climate mobility will face both new risks as well as new opportunities. They may face child protection concerns during their journey, trauma, maybe family separation, interruptions in healthcare and education. But at the same time, if they're moving out of places that are very vulnerable to climate change, moving can help them get out of the way of dangers from storms or flooding. It can improve water security if they're moving out of areas affected by drought. It can lead to improved education access if they're moving to a city with expanded opportunities. So the support, resources, and choices they have both before, during, and after their moves will really matter. A lot of these themes will be very familiar for any of you who are already focused on young children on the move, like internally displaced and refugee children. And while we would likely benefit from more targeted approaches for young children experiencing climate mobility specifically, existing best practices from that space are a great place to start. The last key finding I want to elevate is the importance of integration and belonging. This came up time and time again. Children and their caregivers need to be able to bring their language, their traditions, their cultures with them and really feel like they belong. Because if families are not able to make a home where they've moved, they may move back to where home is, even if that's increasingly unsafe. When I was conducting the key informant interviews, one of the areas I was most excited to explore was what policies and programs experts in the field were already seeing happening and felt were really good examples of how we can start to respond to young children's needs. The result is around 10 existing practices for addressing the needs of young children experiencing climate mobility that could be adapted or scaled. Since there's not enough time to go into all the promising practices in depth, I'm just going to highlight 3 in the time that we have. One is facilitating family-friendly mobility, and an example is given of policies from Vanuatu, which is one of the few countries really at the forefront of planning for this. They have policies designed to ensure continuity of access to education and healthcare for children in displacement, migration, and planned relocation. And they commit to exploring safe international labor mobility schemes for families who will need to move. Second, given the deep relationship between climate mobility and urbanization, the report gives an example from Addis Ababa, where they're promoting holistic, child-friendly urban growth. And lastly, given how important it is to facilitate children's integration into their new homes, communities, systems, Uganda and Colombia are highlighted for their quite inclusive policies for displaced and migrant children that promote integration in host communities and allow families to access national services. And since there's not enough time to go through all the recommendations, I'm again going to highlight just 3. We need more high-quality, age-disaggregated data so we can track and respond. We also need more research on children's needs when affected by climate mobility and the effectiveness of programs to address those needs. We need inclusive, child-friendly growth in regions where people are going to be moving in as a result of climate mobility, like those urban areas. This will require thinking ahead about new housing, schools, health clinics, building the workforce in education and health, and expanding access to affordable childcare and livelihood opportunities for the caregivers. And in all the responses, we need to be really intentional about including mental health and psychosocial support for both children and caregivers. Moving at any age, under any circumstances, can be stressful, never mind when you're forced to leave your home because of drought or wildfires or rising sea levels. So we really need to attend to those needs. For me, the theme in a lot of this is taking the time to look ahead and plan. One area that's fairly unique about climate mobility as a crisis is that we can model it and we do have time before we expect to see the most families affected. And that's an opportunity to think about how we can be designing our programs and our policies to protect young children, protect the investments that governments have already made in their education and health, and protect their rights and well-being so they can be safe and cared for, no matter where home is or where it becomes. So I will wrap there. Thank you. And please read the report if you're interested in learning more.
Thanks, Rosa. Such an important topic and such an overlooked group. So hopefully with this report, great reactions, we'll learn a lot more about children on the move and what we can do about them. All right, so that ends our series on climate, but doesn't end our webinar because we still have a couple more fellows who worked on other issues that were not climate related. So with that, I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, who is Suhani. Oh, sorry. Here we go. Suhani Zaime from Bangladesh. And what she looked at was quite interesting, looking at informal workers, people who work in the informal economy, and what are their specific parenting and caregiving needs, and whether there are programs that are designed to address and meet their specific needs, which is very different than people who are, working in stable work environments. So Suhani was mentored by Dr. Mark Tomlinson from Stellenbosch University, and her peer mentor, who was actually a parenting fellow last cohort, Sai Durgeshwari Rajandran from Malaysia, was her peer mentor. All right, with that, over to you. So just everyone, we're switching over from climate change. Now we're transitioning into looking at the informal care work and parenting and caregiving needs of that population. All right, over to you, Suhani.
Thank you, Shakafe. Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, and hello. I'm excited to discuss important topic of supporting caregiving needs of informal parents working in the informal economy, and I hope you will read the report to learn more. We see them everywhere, outdoors in marketplaces as market traders, sidewalks as street vendors or waste pickers, or indoors working as home-based workers, repairing materials, sewing, or performing domestic work. 60% of the global workforce are informal workers working unregulated hours with low and irregular pay without labor or social protections. 55% of women who work are in informal employment, working spread across the global south, where childcare services are also limited. As the informal economy continues to grow, this particularly vulnerable population face an added layer of vulnerability with the growing threat of climate change. While broader social, economic, and gender-related challenges shape the realities of informal workers, the objectives of this report is to focus on the diversity of informal work and the unique caregiving challenges based on the nature of informal work. While there's a lot of research on the informal economy from a labor perspective, there is very limited research on the intersection of informal workers as parents and the caregiving practices of informal communities. 10 programs supporting low-income families, particularly informal communities across 7 countries, were examined to see how parenting programs are supporting parents working across the informal sector by accommodating flexible working hours of operations, serving a wide age range of children, providing nutrition interventions, and targeted parenting support to see how parents can be better supported. It is fundamental to first consider the specific working conditions to understand how the nature of informal work of parents affect their role as caregivers. It is either difficult, unsafe, or impossible for informal workers to work alongside their children. Factors such as dangerous work environment, lack of on-site childcare facilities or feeding support nearby, long hours of separation from children, exposure to toxic elements, constant moving or relocation can serve as barriers to providing nurturing care, supporting age-appropriate development, or responsive caregiving practices, which can all impact children's healthy development. So this is not a comprehensive list, but this table summarizes how the work context presents specific caregiving challenges of informal workers. So if we take a closer look, we see that street vendors, market traders who are static and based in one location throughout the day still have to manage the challenge of balancing customers and childcare while trying to provide adequate shelter for their children. Even domestic workers who work in home-based settings still have to manage work and childcare, which can result in decreased productivity, which often means loss of income. And for some workers, it is simply impossible to bring their children along to work with them, such as street performers or repair workers who are moving from various work sites and face high unpredictability and inconsistency in their work. Similar to agriculture workers, industrial location-based workers, such as construction workers and farm factory and garment workers who work in hazardous work environments with exposure to toxic elements, making it a very dangerous environment for children to be around. The report shares great details of the program, so I'll summarize here briefly some of the strategies shown to be effective for supporting parents across a variety of informal contexts. In South Africa, pop-up crates have been designed to provide a childcare space and marketplaces to allow children to rest, play, and a nappy changing station where parents work. In both India and Burkina Faso, mobile creches serve as a childcare arrangement in rural, remote, and urban spaces where agriculture workers and construction sites gather, where childcare facilities may otherwise be unavailable. In both Peru and Colombia, home visiting programs have been combined with center-based services to support parents working irregular hours by increasing accessibility. Self-employed Women's Association, SEWA, in India has dedicated its services to accommodate the needs of informal workers by offering flexible hours of operations, visiting flexibility, which has helped older siblings return to school. Similar to mobile creches in India and Burkina Faso, Bangladesh is also providing feeding and childcare facilities on site for garment workers. Interventions across Colombia and Kenya are strengthening home-based childcare services as well as training local caregivers and promoting women's employment to expand community-based childcare solutions. SEWA is also providing financial literacy training and referrals for children with special needs to strengthen parenting support beyond childcare. But there are all still gaps where informal workers remain underserved, such as limited coverage for highly mobile workers or parents working night shifts or 7 days a week. Homes are often not recognized or acknowledged as a workplace, so there is a lack of inclusive support for domestic workers or single fathers, since mothers are assumed to be the primary caregivers. Even though the report shares 10 examples across 7 countries, it is important to remember that informal workers often do not have a variety of childcare options to choose from based on where they work and live. So it is also important to note that childcare models from one context may not be readily transferable to another. Even though mobile creches are being implemented in both India and Burkina Faso, they vary significantly in terms of infrastructure, funding, government support, and cultural needs. So it's important to include informal workers in the design process to adapt to their specific needs by training local caregivers for community empowerment and sustainability, by amplifying their voices to advocate for systemic change. Partnerships with governments have been shown to reach the most vulnerable populations and provide financial stability. So it is important to work with entities to integrate contextually appropriate childcare arrangements, but overall to keep it simple, to maximize accessibility and participation to include those who need support the most. We must remember that low quality childcare can also have adverse effects on ECD and discourage parents from participating. So co-creating programs that are flexible, affordable, and high quality can ensure that every child and every caregiver has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Wow, Suhani, take a breath. That was excellent. We learned so much about the situation of informal workers and how we need to really design our services to be able to meet their specific situation. So really well done. You're getting a lot of great reactions. Hey, fellows, there's so many questions in the Q&A, so please head over to the Q&A. Attendees, please continue to share your questions in the Q&A, share your reflections in the chat, and continue talking to each other. We have a very lively chat and Q&A happening. All right, so we have only, sadly, 2 more fellow presentations left, but very, very exciting. We have one fellow who's looking at childcare systems and financing, who's coming up next, and then the last fellow looking at nutrition. So really exciting work. So let me introduce you to our next speaker. We have Dolgun Batmung, who is from Mongolia, and she looked at exploring financial flows in the childcare systems in Mongolia, and she was actually building on some of the work that ECDAN has done on developing a childcare systems map. So it's really exciting to see her take something that we've done as a global network and to apply it in the Mongolian context. So she is looking at where are the opportunities for innovative financing, bringing in alternative financing to be able to strengthen and expand the childcare system in Mongolia. She was mentored by a very dear colleague to the network, Dr. Richard Chivaka, who is the CEO of Spark Health Africa, who they do excellent systems work all over Africa. And her peer mentor from our last cohort was Jacqueline Natal. All right, Dolgun, over to you. And remember to speak slowly.
Thank you so much, Shikofe. I'll just share my slides. Can you see them?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, as Shikofe already introduced me and my mentors, I'll jump right into it. As we all know, childcare systems are quite complex. There are various interconnected parts that shape it, like policies, funding, workforce, and social norms, which all affect how the quality and access of childcare services are experienced by children and their families. Because of this complexity, a systems thinking approach helps us to understand how these parts are interact, where things are breaking down, and where we can intervene to improve the access and quality of childcare for all children. To support this kind of initiative and thinking, ECDAN launched the Systems Thinking for ECD initiative back in 2023 and brought together experts from Asia and Africa, as Shikofe already has mentioned. And one major outcome was the childcare systems map, a tool that visualizes the key dynamics in childcare systems in low-middle income countries. While this map provides a very strong international framework, it's not country-specific. So as part of my fellowship with ECDAN, I adapted it to Mongolia, focusing specifically on how impact investing could be used to strengthen the system. And unlike traditional aid, impact investing blends financial returns with social impact, offering a potentially scalable and a sustainable way to improve access and quality of socially important services, such as childcare. So why Mongolia? First, I'm originally from there, so it's the country that I understand the best and where I can make the most meaningful contribution to ECDAN systems mapping initiative. But beyond that, without any bias, Mongolia is a very interesting case for childcare systems for innovation. It's a lower middle income country in Northeast Asia with a population of slightly over 3.5 million. That makes it easier to measure the impact of innovative reforms compared to countries with a larger population. There are also strong public demand for childcare. Mongolia has a long tradition of women participating in the workforce, which means childcare is actually widely seen as a necessity than a luxury. The childcare system is partially supported through social welfare programs, which helps reduce out-of-pocket costs for families. And we're also seeing some early signs of private sector interest. For instance, the home-based childcare centers are emerging. This opens doors for new financing models like results-based funding to be tested and scaled. On top of that, a recent change to Mongolia's corporate tax law now allows companies to allocate 1% of their taxes towards social impact initiatives. With the right advocacy and regulations, this policy can be used to encourage corporate investment in childcare systems development, for instance. And finally, Mongolia has a local development fund that lets communities decide by themselves how public money is being spent in their community. And so far, this has been mostly spent for infrastructure projects, but it has the potential to support community-based childcare initiatives, for instance. Despite all these enablers, there are also major systemic inhibitors holding Mongolia's childcare system back. The governance for childcare is fragmented across ministries, making it nearly impossible for strategic coordination. Access to childcare system remains very unequal. So in urban areas, there are far more services than in rural communities. And also children under the age of 3 are mostly left behind in the system. Public funding is alone not enough, as we all know, and looking at the current developments in international aid. But private investment is not really channeled strategically towards childcare. The few childcare entrepreneurs that the country has are struggling to grow due to lack of strategic ecosystem for startups to grow in the field. And finally, like many other countries, early childhood educators are unfortunately underpaid and overworked, making it hard to attract and retain childcare professionals. So moving forward, I developed recommendations based on the insights gathered through this project, addressing 3 main stakeholders in the system. First are the policymakers. First and foremost, assigning a dedicated government body is a must for a more efficient coordination for a strategic long-term growth of the childcare system. And moreover, like incentivizing pro-childcare workplace policies and revising parental leave regulations are essential so that childcare falls not only on the shoulders of families, largely on mothers, as it does right now. When it comes to channeling private investment to childcare, policymakers must define a very clear system what is actually social impact investing and how to measure it, because currently it's too broadly defined and there are no metrics how to measure the impact and the results from private capital in the field. Moreover, introducing de-risking strategies and tools for both private investors and the public is essential when private capital gets involved in essential services such as childcare, as we have to count also the risks that are getting involved. And lastly, improving reporting systems of childcare by using, for instance, storytelling to humanize the data is key to sustain momentum and showcase the political will in the field. The next actors that are also, of course, important is the private sector. It is important for the private sector to start realize that childcare is not just a social service, but actually an investment in their own business that helps ensuring their workforce stability and productivity, as well as attract new talent if they run, for instance, workplace-based childcare centers. Moreover, now that Mongolia has this new corporate tax incentive law in place, it's now up to the businesses to strategically invest in high priority social impact fields such as childcare. Last but not least, caregivers and families are powerful drivers of systemic change. If they can realize and unite their voices as caregivers and voters, that can shape both political agendas and budgeting priorities by actively participating in decision-making through holding the elected officials more accountable towards childcare reforms and engaging in local development funds, for instance, in the case of Mongolia, towards locally, supporting early care solutions. On a more personal level, promoting shared responsibility, such as through advocating for employee support and encouraging greater involvement from fathers, can help shift cultural norms in caregiving. So this was a very brief snapshot of my project results. If you're interested in learning more, please go ahead and visit ECDAN's website. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dilgun. Amazing. That was actually quite a complex project to try to capture in a 7-minute presentation, and I encourage everyone to go over and read Dilgun's report because it's quite interesting and a quite interesting approach he's taken to the work. So I learned a lot from it, and I think you will too. All right, everyone, we're down to our last presenter. I know everyone's like, no, let's keep learning. But again, the learning doesn't stop after this webinar. It continues with all the reports that the fellows have spent months working on, which I encourage you all to go read. All right, to close out the webinar, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Lizelle Engelbrecht, who is from South Africa. And she has done a really interesting project under the guidance of Ramila Karnati at Save the Children, but also Dr. Francis Aboud at McGill University, looking at a review of early childhood programs being integrated with early nutrition programs and what we're learning. She's done a little bit of a scoping review on that, so that's exciting. And her peer mentor is Paul Otwate from Kenya. He was a fellow during the last cohort. And with that, Lizelle, no pressure, but close us out with a bang. Over to you, Lizelle.
Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Again to everybody at ECDAN and also to the mentors. So yes, I'll be presenting findings on a scoping review on integrated nutrition and stimulation in early childhood development. So the World Health Organization has recommended integrated ECD interventions
Lizelle,
since 2018.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we don't see your slides.
Oh, not? Oh. Let's try that again.
And if you want to just speak slower as well, that would be great.
Can you see them now?
It seems like they're loading. Okay, so Lizelle, really speak slowly because your voice seems like it's, I don't know what's happening, but just try to speak slowly so that we can catch up with you. All right, go for it, Lizelle.
Okay, great. So let me try again. So the World Health Organization has recommended integrated ECD interventions since 2018, but implementation evidence is still limited. And gaps remain in understanding which delivery and implementation features are associated with success. So building on previous research by Yousafzai Aboud Dulal, we further wanted to explore what makes integrated nutrition and psychosocial interventions effective. So the goal was really to translate evidence into practical guidance for integrated ECD interventions in low and middle income countries. And the timing is critical. So rising poverty, malnutrition, and learning losses after COVID, along with recent funding cuts, increases the urgency to look at what drives child development outcomes and to prevent implementing and scaling less effective interventions. So we carried out a scoping review covering studies published between 2014 and 2024, and the search used key terms similar to those used in Aboud and Yousafzai's 2014 review, and spanned over various academic databases, grade literature, and also included expert contributions. We focused on studies from low and middle income countries that integrated both nutrition and psychosocial stimulation for children under 6 years, and that included some form of outcome evaluation. In total, we then selected 18 studies. And using then a very structured extraction tool, we capture details on program content, delivery methods, and implementation strategies. Our analysis involved comparing how frequently certain features appeared when effective outcomes were reported. And due to the limited number of studies, we didn't conduct any statistical tests, but focused rather on identifying common patterns linked to the positive outcomes. So to understand which features of these integrated programs were linked to effectiveness, we looked at 4 key areas across the 18 studies. So for nutrition and stimulation content, we looked at education elements. So what was taught, and then we also looked at what was provided, so elements like foods or toys, and then whether practice-based learning elements were included. Then we also looked at behavior change techniques, which had similarities to some of the practice-based learning and the provision elements, but also included some additional aspects, like the use of small media, such as leave-behind materials or posters, the use of job aids, and whether problem-solving activities or social support techniques were used. We then also looked at the implementation process. So who delivered the intervention, where it was delivered, and what support was provided. And this structured approach helped us to look at the different interventions through a shared lens. So starting with the nutrition outcomes, 4 out of 4 studies measuring dietary diversity reported improvements, and 6 out of the 12 studies that reported reported growth gains. Here it is, however, very relevant to note that 5 out of the 6 interventions that showed growth improvements included some form of food or agricultural inputs, like the provision of seeds or chicks, or fortified foods or supplements. Behavior change techniques like food demonstrations and job aids and small media such as posters and handouts were commonly used in the effective programs. On the right here is an example of a nutrition handout that was used in the Msingi Bora intervention in Kenya. You'll also notice that it includes the food groups that would be typically measured when assessing dietary diversity. For psychosocial stimulation, about 2/3 of the programs assessing cognitive or language development showed improvements. Programs that use books or toys, and also those with mixed delivery approaches, so group sessions plus home visits, were often effective. Effective programs also often included behavior change techniques like demonstrations and problem solving, and the use of volunteers, paraprofessionals, supportive supervision, and refresher training were also commonly associated with improvements. This picture here is an example of play and communication activities that were illustrated in handout materials, also in the Msingi Bora intervention. The illustration used the Bailey Scales assessment that is used to measure young child development. Parenting knowledge and practices improved in 85% of the studies measuring it. Effectiveness was associated with the use of job aids, performance-based learning, mixed delivery modes, and ongoing supervision and support for volunteers implementing these programs. On the right is an example of the different counseling cards with integrated messages on responsive care and early learning that were used as job aids by the volunteers in Ghana and Kyrgyz Republic in the USAID Advancing Nutrition Interventions. Across the board, 5 features were most consistently associated with positive outcomes. These were food and agricultural inputs, the provision of play materials or books, practice-based learning, mixed delivery mode, so group plus home, and then refresher training and supportive supervision provided to program implementers. Interestingly, some commonly used strategies were less effective than expected. Home visits alone, for example, underperformed compared to mixed models, and longer training durations didn't necessarily guarantee better results. There are a number of limitations, but the one I want to highlight is inconsistent reporting, as this makes comparisons across interventions and systematic reviews very difficult. You can read the reports for a comprehensive list of recommendations, but here I only want to highlight the first 4 key recommendations, and that is to include food support in integrated interventions where possible, and not just nutrition education. to make use of locally available and low-cost resources to use as stimulation materials and use in activities, to support delivery staff with refresher training and supportive supervision to improve the quality of program delivery. And then finally, to think about how to incorporate behavior change strategies and tools into these interventions. But more of the recommendations can be found in the full report. So to conclude, intervention design matters, and we should be prudent about which interventions are scaled and use the evidence to guide us. We should also remember that while simulation alone improves minds, and food alone feeds bodies, together they can transform futures. And that is a real promise and potential of integrated programs. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lizelle. And with that, it concludes the presentations from our fellows. And now it's my pleasure so before I transition to the last few minutes of our time together here, I just wanted to encourage all the fellows to look at the Q&A. There are a lot of questions for you, so please take a moment. And because we don't have enough time to hear live responses from all the fellows, because it wouldn't be fair if we just asked one or two, so I encourage everyone to go over to the chat as well, the Q&A, and to read the responses, because there's some really nice, thoughtful responses there. But in the last few minutes I have the honor of being joined. I had the honor of being joined by Dr. Kim Bowler, who previously served as a mentor for one of our fellows, and then loved the program so much, decided to join on as a member of our steering committee, and she has been an invaluable contributor to the fellowship. And then also Jacqueline, who was previously a fellow with us, and this year she stepped into the role as a peer mentor. And so Kim, I would love to just hear your reflections of what you heard today of the fellows' work, but also your experience as a mentor and a member of the steering committee. So if you can just share a few words with us today. And again, thank you to you both, because all of the mentors, the steering committee members, peer mentors are all volunteers. So without them, this program would not function. So we're very grateful for their service. So Kim, we would love to hear a little bit from your.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shikufe. Thank you, everyone. What an exciting time. I just cannot, I'm almost jumping out of my seat here. As a steering committee member, as a former mentor, I just want to be clear, what you're seeing today is the culmination of so much work, so much investment of time and energy, and we are all the beneficiaries of it today. So just know behind the scenes, this process goes on through the year, and it is a very nurturing and very supportive experience. I just quickly want to say, the bravery you saw today, we had fellows jumping into other areas, coming from climate into ECD into climate, and so on. That takes a lot of bravery and strength, and bravo to all of them. And I know I benefited from those new perspectives. The innovation that we're seeing all over the world is just thrilling, and to have it at the city level, at the state level, the national level, we can jump forward from here and push that innovation even further. So hats off to the fellows for that, and to ECDAN for providing the format and the platform for all of us to get this out into our networks as well. And then these opportunities are just, they feel, again, very inspiring for pushing in and pulling out the information to really get into the hands of the actors and those who can use it. So just thrilled to see, so glad to be able to be part of this day today, and encourage everyone, jump in. This is a great investment, funding-wise, but also professionally. Thanks, Shikufe.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kim. That's really inspiring. And Jackie, it would be great to hear from you, because you've both been a fellow and now as a peer mentor. And this is the first year we tried, the peer mentorship in addition to the mentorship. So would love to hear your experience both as a fellow and as an alumni of the fellowship network. So Jackie, some reflections from you.
Thank you so much, Shikufe. And first of all, congratulations, fellows, for the hard work and all the great work. Thank you so much for that. For me, I think it was very inspiring to watch today the final project and so on. It was so good. And as a peer mentor and as a previous knowledge fellow, I think for me, the word is learn. I learned so much, both being a peer mentor, but also as a knowledge fellow. I learned so much from, for example, Mongolia and the impact investing ECD with Dugan. It was so inspiring. And I was actually positively surprised and impressed by the final project. And I think we have so much in this report and all the reports. And I really recommend you to dive deeper on that. So I think the learning. I think this is the word for me.
And Jacqueline, how did you like being a peer mentor?
Yeah, it was so great. As I said, the word is learning, because it was not only to give, but also to receive. And at the end, I think I received most than I give. So it was so nice, this experience, as I could, as I said, learn so much from Dugan and from this experience.
Amazing. And I have my colleague Emily on, who's been very instrumental in this program. And so Emily, do you want to give us a quick update of the 2025 cohort? I know the applications are closed, so people cannot apply this year, but maybe a quick sneak peek into what we're finding in terms of the current applicants.
Yeah, thanks so much, Shikufe. Really exciting to be part of this program. Congratulations, fellows. And as Shikufe said, we are very excited to be already in the process of selecting our next cohort for 2025. So the application closed on April 1st. We had a wonderful turnout of 129 applicants. We're in the process of shortlisting them now. And one of the exciting things about the upcoming cohort is that they're going to focus on specifically creating advocacy resources. So we're going to be following up on some of the work that's been done and that you've seen here related to climate, related to childcare systems, related to parenting, and related to financing, and really try to take some of that information that's out there and turn it into some practical materials that give people ways to take action and engage with policymakers to create change in these areas. So looking forward to that.
And I also want to recognize my colleague, Hannah Fromm, who has also been a really integral part of the process. So Hannah, there's a lot of effort by the secretary that goes on behind the scenes. So wanting to thank Hannah as well for her great efforts as well. Okay, everyone, this is the moment we've been waiting for. This is an official graduation of the fellowship. So with your reactions, please help us celebrate this 2024 cohort who are officially completing their fellowship. A big congratulations to you, Hernan, Lizelle, Royu, Suhani, Rosa, Dulgun, Omkar. Bashiru, I don't know why you're not on video. Start your video, and maybe we can take a little screenshot as our group photo as a completion of this fellowship program. So big thanks to the steering committee, to every single mentor, to all the peer mentors as well. And congratulations to you fellows. Yeah, so well done. And thank you to everyone who is here to learn together from all the work that the fellows have done. We hope you all have long careers in the field of early childhood globally. And we look forward to having opportunities where you can network with past alumni fellows as well. And see you everyone in 2025 at the end of this year to hear from the new cohort and celebrate them just like we're being celebrated you so much. So thanks everyone. This was a really, really enriching 90 minutes we spent together. Yeah. So I hope the downloads of all the projects, I hope everyone is rushing over right now to download these projects and reading them. And let's continue the engagement. We have ECD Connect, our community platform. So if you have questions about the projects, the best way to get them answered is to go over to ECD Connect. Maybe we can put the link in the chat. If you haven't registered, that would be a great place. Read the report, ask questions, and we'll make sure the fellows are there answering your questions. So let's continue the conversation after this webinar. Let's not let the learning stop here. Again, big thank you to everyone. I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And again, congratulations to the fellows. Well done.
Thank you, everyone.
Any last words from the fellows? Any last, we can do a little round. And how do you feel, everyone? You can unmute yourselves. You have more than 7 minutes now.
On my
Hernan?
side, very excited about well, presenting the results and also listening to the results of my fellow colleagues. I want to congratulate all of them and also thank again the ECDAN Secretariat for all the support, mentors and peer mentors as well.
Thanks, Hernan. Any other fellow, anything you want to share about your experience? Anything that's, I know past fellows, they've gotten jobs because of the fellowships. They've changed some of what they want to focus on. Any big takeaways for you from your projects? They're so shy, but they're not really. You guys can unmute yourself.
I think personally, oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Suhani,
No, go ahead,
you'll
Suhani.
go? Yeah.
No, you go ahead, honey.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Shekufe, to Emily, Hannah, to the Secretariat, to ECDAN for this amazing opportunity. It was a really great learning opportunity, and it was a really great opportunity to meet all the other fellows and to get to know them. And I think the biggest takeaway that I am very proud of and excited about is to see like how diverse the work for ECD is and how all of our work, we see the diversity in our projects and we do see the diversity in the topics, but it's all related to children and to supporting parents, and that's exciting. So there's so much work to be done, and I look forward to continuing my learning and to growing my experience in ECD, and it's just been such an exciting adventure. So thank you all for your time and for all your support.
Nice, Suhani. Dolgan?
Yeah, I just want to tag on what Suhani has already said. It really helped me to look at things from the systems perspective rather than like focusing on one single aspect of things, especially given ECD is at the intersection of so many different policy measures. It was really helpful to get that insight, and really looking forward to also stay in touch with my fellows and the Secretariat. It's been a wonderful journey. Thank you so much.
Amazing. And I just want to like point out again the diversity of Mongolia, India, Bangladesh, US, Uruguay, South Africa, China. I mean, it's incredible the diversity we have. Any other fellows before we close this forever? Lizelle, Royu, any reflections? Bashiru? Omkar? Go ahead, Omkar.
Yes, I would like to go ahead. Yes. So coming from the entire different background, that is climate change background, this ECD thing was very new for me. While applying this fellowship, I was like, why we even dealing specifically ECD with the climate change? What is as the specific issues? And then when I started literature review, wow, it was entire very new domain, and problems are very huge, especially in this intersection. So very great insights, great learning. Thank you so much, ECDAN, for providing this opportunity. Yes, thank you so much.
Amazing. Thanks, Omkar. All right. Any other fellows? Bashir, did you want to say something?
Yes, and I would like to appreciate you, the Secretariat, Emily. You have done a great job. And especially also to my mentors. They have been very supportive. I can say this fellowship has helped me to shape my research for like different audience, because coming from the environment background, I am more intense into research, but like stepping into this has helped me to also shape my product for the policy and other audience. And I can say that is great. It's one of the things that I'm proud of.
Amazing, Bashiru. Thank you. All right. If there's nobody else that wants to say anything, with that, we will close this webinar. And again, please go over and download their reports, read them. They will be there. Read the reports of past fellowships. Again, a reminder that their reports are not official ECDAN documents or recommendations officially from ECDAN, but rather individual projects of the fellows. All right, wishing everyone a great day. I hope you continue your learning wherever you are. Thanks, fellows, for giving us an enriching 90 minutes with all your efforts. I hope you all also have a great day. So, thank you. And yes, please, thank you to the Bainham Family Foundation. Thanks, Emily, for that reminder, without whom this would not be possible. So thank you to the Bainham Family Foundation. All right, thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.